Hey boys and girls, and welcome to Bedtime Bible Stories here at Valley View Baptist Church. Tonight we're going to hear from Brother Brad Padgett.
Good evening, boys and girls. I've got a story I want to share with you. It took place many years ago, several thousand years ago actually, and it happened in the land of Israel. And the children of Israel at that time had been in their country for a couple of hundred years since they'd come up out of the land of Egypt. And the Bible says that the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. So they weren't listening to the Lord's commandments. They weren't following the guidelines that he had given them. And so the Lord had allowed another country, an enemy of Israel's, to come up against them. And they were called the Midianites. The Midianites, and there was another country called the Amalekites that came up with the Midianites. And the Bible says that they drove them from their homes and actually had them going and living in caves and in dens up in the mountains because they were so afraid of these Midianites. And the Bible goes on to say that the Midianites, they would bring their horses and their camels and their cattle, and they were actually eating up all the good grasses that the Israelites had maintained for their own sheep and goats and cattle. And so not only had the Midianites chased them out of their homes, the Midianites were taking all their grasses that fed their livestock. Even too, the Bible says that the Midianites were going and destroying and taking all the fruit from their all their corn and all their grains, their wheats that they made their breads out of. And so the Bible says that the children of Israel were in a bad situation. They had nobody to lead them and help them. And so there was a few of the Israelites that started praying and asking the Lord for help, asking God to send somebody to help them. And the Bible says that the Lord heard their prayer. And God found a young man by the name of Gideon. The Bible starts out the story of Gideon that he was at the wine press of his father, the Bible says, and he was threshing grain. So in other words, he was taking like wheat and he was getting all the grains off of those heads of wheat so that his family could make bread with that. Well, the Bible says that the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon. And so you can imagine Gideon, he's sitting there working and trying to get food together for his family. And all of a sudden, this man shows up that he's never seen before. And immediately Gideon realizes, man, there's something different about this guy. I don't know exactly what it is, but there's something different about this fella. And so this angel of the Lord starts talking to Gideon and telling Gideon that the Lord wants to use him to save his people. Well, Gideon's sitting there thinking, man, I'm not a hero. I'm just simply here working for my dad, trying to help make food for our family. And I don't have the strength. I don't have the knowledge to be able to go and save the children of Israel. And so Gideon's pondering on this, and the angel of the Lord sitting there telling him that he's going to use him in a mighty way. So Gideon tells the angel, he says, wait just 1 minute. He says, let me go in the house and think on this for a minute. And he says, while I'm there, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a meal. And while we're eating, you can tell me more about your plan. So Gideon goes, and the Bible says that he makes a meal, makes some meat, makes some bread. I figure it's probably some Hot Pockets or something, and made some soup for the angel of the Lord and brings it out to the angel. And the angel tells Gideon, he says, Gideon, I'll tell you what, just set the food right here on this rock. And so Gideon says, sure, sets the food out on the rock. And the angel of the Lord takes his staff and he touches the food. And the Bible says that flames came up out of the rock and consumed all the bread, all the meat, and the soup that Gideon had made for him. You can imagine the surprise that Gideon had of, he just saw a miracle performed right in front of his very eyes. And so it helped Gideon to understand, man, this guy must be who he says he is. And so the Bible says that the angel of the Lord disappeared. And immediately thereafter, the voice of the Lord came to Gideon, telling Gideon again, fear not, I'm going to use you to work a great miracle. Well, Gideon again says to the Lord, he says, Lord, look, I appreciate your confidence in me, but again, I'm not that strong of a guy. I'm not even very well known. People don't even know who I am. And I'm smart enough, but I'm not that smart. And so, Lord, if you don't care, just forgive me for my unbelief, but if I could ask of a miracle of you to confirm for me that you're really who you say you are. God says, fair enough. And so Gideon says, look, Lord, I'm gonna take this piece of wool and I'm gonna set it out. And tonight I'm gonna set it out in the yard. And when I wake up in the morning, I want the fleece to be soaking wet with dew. But my grass in my yard, I want it to be dry. Okay, Lord says, you go ahead and do that. I'll take you up on that. So Gideon puts it out there. He goes to bed that night, and man, he could hardly sleep, sitting thinking about this. So the next morning rolls around. Gideon, he's wide awake. He's out the door as soon as the first light appears, and he's out there, and he picks up the fleece, and man, he can hardly pick it up. It's so full of water. The Bible says he takes and he wrings it out and fills up a bowl of water. Man, Gideon's like, there's only one thing, dear God, that I can ask is give me one more chance at this. He says, tonight I want to put this same fleece out, but this time I want you to make the fleece dry, and I want my yard to be soaking wet. God says, okay, I'll grant you that. So again, Gideon goes to bed, goes to sleep. Again, can hardly sleep, wonder what in the world is the Lord wanting to do with me. Wakes up the next morning, goes out there, sure enough, gets his sandals soaking wet as he's walking out to the fleece. But he picks up the fleece, dry, no water whatsoever on it. So Gideon understands, Lord, this has got to be you that's talking to me. You've shown me. I trust you. What's the next step?
Well, that's all we have time for tonight. What's going to be Gideon's next step? Well, you'll just have to tune in tomorrow to find out. Until then, I hope you guys have a good night's rest. We'll see you tomorrow.